In 1980, Umberto Lenzi returned to the cannibal genre with the Jonestown Massacre-inspired Eaten Alive. With all the generic features of the genre, cannibalism, naked women, and boring scenes in New York, the film always keeps you interested, even if it is utterly ridiculous. I am the Italian Horror Guy, and this is the Italian Horror Guy podcast. So, I must say, this particular film sort of occupies this bizarre sort of space, I think, within, well, my apologies, I've got the COVID, within the context of film and, well, in some ways culture, I think, with the Jonestown Massacre vibes, which is very much in keeping with exploitation. And I guess the more, the further into this film you get, especially knowing that Cannibal Ferox is coming up in his in Lenzi's sort of cannibal themed movie, I would say it's probably frustrating more than anything else. It's listed in various places as 85 minutes. My cut, which is a DVD cut, is 81 minutes. And for the life of me, I can't understand, outside of probable just production issues that would automatically come along with making a film like this. But I can't understand why they just didn't give themselves a little bit more time. This is a complaint that I've levelled at previous films on this podcast from the similar era. A couple of zombie films, I do believe. The Zombie Holocaust could surely have done with a little bit more fleshing out time, pardon the pun. But there's just a sense that this film, Eaten Alive that is always in a massive rush to get somewhere, which is sort of rather confounding because of the amount of time it spends just listening to Jonas sort of stand in front of his little followers and just talk nonsense, right? It's like the film always feels like it's in a rush to get somewhere, but we know exactly where it's going the whole time. And I think what's really frustrating about it is that Ivan Rasimov, seemingly to me, is a genuinely good actor, or was a genuinely good actor. That to me was very, very clear in the previous film. And Mimi Lay seems to have improved. I think I made comment on Man from the Deep River that she's not much of an actress. And even, to be honest, Robert Kerman, I think, I just watched an interview with him. I believe it's on I found it on YouTube, but I believe it's on one of the special cuts of Cannibal Holocaust. It's about a 35-minute interview talking about his experiences and stuff, and how he likely, absolutely fantastic interview. You should check it out if you haven't before. He sort of talked about how likely his involvement, specifically in Cannibal Holocaust, but this genre in general, held him back from his career developing in a much more effective and high quality way. And I can sort of see this because if you look at him in this film as well as Cannibal Holocaust, we're not talking about films with unbelievable ensemble casts by any means, but I think there's a sense to me that he stands out. And he's playing a fairly different role in this one, right? He's this sort of, Nam vet with attitude in this one, and in the Cannibal Holocaust he's like this professor. But in both roles he's quite well fitted and really does outperform the other actors. Like Janet Agron is wonderful to look at. She's a model, not much of an actress, so he really outshines her. But yeah, I guess that I'd never thought much of this movie. It's very much the other Robert Kerman cannibal film. It's the other Umberto Lenzi cannibal film, right? It's the other Eaten Alive, not to be confused with the Tobe Hooper Eaten Alive with crocodiles or alligators, and it's just sort of and it steals all this footage from other cannibal films, which is bizarre, honestly. But in some ways, its aims are just about as high as any of the cannibal films, right? We know Cannibal Holocaust was obviously a comment on Vietnam and all that kind of stuff, but the Jonestown stuff in this film is really, really. I'm not going to say that it's well put together, but this film came out, within a couple of years of that happening, and it's pretty on the nose, right? Like there's no hiding it, and I guess I'll make mention of the fact that last time I watched this film, I didn't know what the Jonestown Massacre was. I'd just sort of heard of it. But actually had always assumed it was like some kind of mass shooting. And within the last couple of years, I discovered it and, filled in some of the gap of my historical ignorance. And as I was just watching it again before recording this podcast, it was quite early in the film that I was like, oh, because they detail the the reclusive sort of community, and I thought of Jonestown, and then I sort of got more into it, like, oh wait, then I thought, hang on, this is actually soon after Jonestown. Then I was like, oh, it's called Jonas, and then by then I was like, oh, it was like, they weren't just alluding to it, they were basically depicting it. Probably has the potential of being a little bit disrespectful, I suppose. So I'll get into some of the specifics. And one thing I do love about, and it's so unique to this tiny little era of zombie and cannibal films, there's a particular way that they shoot like New York in the early parts of these films, and it's so crappy and it's got that ridiculous sort of cop drama type music at the start. So right off the bat, it is an interesting start because we, without context, get a bunch of different shots one's from Niagara Falls, and then there's New York. Of 3 or 4 different people just getting shot by some guy with the poison, with the python poison. Is it pythons? Cobra poison, maybe. And that's fine, but it's like, and this is very much the case with Cannibal Ferox, and I'm sure I'll make the point on that episode next week. The link back to New York is like so tenuous that you sort of wish that the film either didn't do it or actually went a little bit further with it, right? So this is obviously, as I've said in the past, it's a running theme with these films to try to sort of have this comment on the civilized having a problem with the uncivilized and blah blah blah, and I wonder who the real cannibals are and all that kind of thing. But the links that Umberto Lenzi tries to draw, I just, they're lazy and completely like just uninteresting. So, I mean, I guess there's a little bit. At least this film gives a reason for us to start in New York. But like as I'm sure complain with the Ferox one next week, that one never gives us a reason. Like there's that random guy who gets shot at the start, and then over the course of the film, we come to realize that he's got a slight link to one of the characters that are in Panaguia or whatever the place is called. But like, so what? Like, I think you would think that the point of these opening sort of dramatic scenes is to link back to something or sort of unfold in an interesting way. So, back to Eaten Alive, it does explain it, but like it's okay, whatever. Right, later that I think it might be Janet Agron's sister. I'll get a list of some names for the cast. Diana, I think, who says later, like, that some of his followers have been killing people in New York or whatever. So, okay, so that's what that was. That was just Jonas being a jerk. All right, whatever. I don't know if that's something that happened with Jim Jones or whatever. But, yeah, it's just a little bit lame. But nonetheless, I do think this is a relatively effective start because they have these things that are happening without context for us, and then we get some shots of Janet Agron just sort of moving around New York, not doing anything, just being a model that we can look at. So good for her. Now, the film, I think, begins to lose itself right off the bat because you know how most cannibal films have like a backstory that, as I've said, is very tenuous and very like underdeveloped to the point that you only had this backstory because you didn't want the accusation to be leveled at you that this was only about the spectacle. And like, fair enough, but the where this movie loses me, I think, is that they get so far into that, like seeming to try to avoid that charge, that it almost forgets to be a cannibal film at some point, right? That it actually is quite, up its own backside about the story it's trying to tell. And it's just such an unbelievably unconvincing story. And I think the main reason for that is because the film is so bloody short that just things can't be developed. So, what's Janet's name? What's Janet Agron's name? Sheila. She's just Sheila. So Sheila goes to, I think, the police or something to talk about the fact that Diana, her sister, is missing. And the cop starts off by saying, well, some very strange things have been happening in New York. And then he says about the 3 killings. But I sort of find that funny because my understanding of New York is like this. Aren't there like murders all the time in New York? Like, don't get me wrong, it is not good that there's some guy just wandering around the CBD killing people with python darts or cobra darts, but it is also odd the way the cop leads is, and well, these are some funny things have been happening. Well, that's your whole life, I would assume, as a cop in New York. Nonetheless, they do that for a while, and then they show Sheila some footage of what's been happening in New Guinea, which there's a mask, and then there's some torture, right? There's some guys that are being hung by their backs and by the back fat or this the skin rolls, and it's like, okay. It's sort of unconvincing because as they're swinging away, they don't look like they're in any pain whatsoever. But see, this is I think where Lenzi, I think, loses us a little bit in his cannibal films, especially as they go on. And look, I think I leveled this criticism even a little bit at the film from last week, and I know I was very critical, but as I said, I do really like that film. At some point, especially in a film where you're claiming to try to have a genuine backstory, you're just sort of doing things that are like, what's your explanation here? It's like, here's some violence. And I think my problem with Lenzi's sort of attitude is that he tries to mask it behind, well, this isn't me condoning these actions, but I'm cataloguing something that happens in the real world. And it's like, are you though? Because there's a really gory, exploitative side to it that sort of makes me a little bit unconvinced about your motivations, right? I'm not particularly sure he's trying to depict or explore the rites and rituals of certain New Guinean tribal communities, so much as he is just trying to find an excuse to have gore in his films. And that's fine, just be honest about it, I think, is probably what I would say. So that happens for a while, and then Mel Ferrar's there for some reason, or Ferrer, and I can't remember if it's him. It is him that says it. He sort of says, that they're trying to use pain to reunite man with nature. But see, and this is weird. Like it just becomes too obvious, right? So he's being a little bit crass and critical of those customs, but then he's self-reflexive as well. He says that Western civilization is the enemy of these people, but Americans will believe in anything that's tax deductible. I'm like, for goodness sake, right? It's just so on the nose, I suppose. All right. I can see my little notes here. There's that scene sort of on the harbour with those hippies and that woman yelling about Jonas, so that gives us a little bit of context that he's full of shit. I'm going to be honest, my biggest problem with the film is that it isn't more focused on Jonas. Because, look, all right, here we go. Here's a big statement. I think in a slightly parallel universe, one that has presumably a slightly less troubled production, and a script that focuses more on Jonas, on developing Jonas into the character that they want, rather than just telling us that he is that and going from there. This could easily have been a very good film. There you go. I think Ivan Rasimov has a great face for a villain. I think his performance in this film is quite excellent. Albeit it's largely just because he's standing there looking like himself. But, I think there's a lot to work with. And they sort of... They let too little try to do too much heavy lifting, I think, in the development of A, Jonas's character, and B, sort of the way people interact with him. So yeah, we eventually we get introduced to Robert Kerman's character, and his name is Mark. How exciting! So Mark is. He's doing some arm wrestling with some guy, and this is like intense arm wrestling where there's knives on the table, so you don't want to lose because then your arm goes into the knife. So that's fine. And then it's established that he was in Vietnam, and he Sheila's like bribing him to get involved in her shit for some reason, and he's a sort of bad boy type, right? It's funny because like he's got a different voice actor in this film that sort of annoys me because I so clearly associate it with the voice with the voice in Cannibal Holocaust, and that voice is like one of the older cops, I think, in this movie, which is frustrating. But like, I guess the problem for mine is that they waste too much time on his character and Sheila, when they just take forever to get to the crux of everything, right? We take so long to actually meet Jonas, unfortunately. So eventually they do travel to the island, and wherever it is, to New Guinea, and it apparently was shot in Sri Lanka. So there you go. There is maybe a few too many references to money in this film. Like, they're obviously making a comment on capitalism and civilization and whatever. So in the chopper on the way over, they're sort of debating about money and blah blah blah. Now they get there and they get taken hostage by this white guy, and the race of people is actually quite relevant in this film because of the social commentary that they're going for, and he puts them in a little room, and he's angry, and he sort of explains the last white people that came here did something bad. I can't remember what it is that he says. Now, there is, it's this film, it's Cannibal Holocaust, it's Cannibal Ferox, it's Man from Deep River. It's so many cannibal films that are, I wonder who the real cannibals are, right? We're no better than them. Now, I think this inquiry, or philosophical inquiry, shall we say, is almost the least effective in this film out of all the cannibal films, because there is just so much going on. Like, these films don't usually have unbelievable depth in terms of storyline, right, or character development or whatever. But there actually is quite a bit going on in this film. They just can't develop any of it because it only goes 81 minutes, and because there's just too much of it. So we've got Sheila, who needs to find her sister. We have to learn a little bit about her sister. We've got Mark the vet, and then we've got to develop Mark and Sheila's budding relationship, which comes in the context of them trying to avoid getting eaten, which doesn't seem justifiable. We're trying to make some comments on white people and capitalism in New York. We're trying to do what I would think is the main thing, and that is establish the maniacal character of Jonas. And it's like, I just think they spend too much time on things that aren't Jonas. So I think the thing is, look, I don't know everything about the history of Jim Jones and the Jonestown Massacre, but was it in like the West Indies somewhere in Georgetown? Georgetown, is that Barbados? Anyway, it's somewhere in the Caribbean. And is there not a sort of inherent white savior complex within that? He was an American politician, right? And it just feels like it's inherent in the main part of the story, right? That we can be critical of of that. It's just a bit much, I think. And this is the problem that and it's partly because I think of quick and ordinary writing, that it's like, oh, well, we have to get our morals very, very clearly out in front for everyone to see. And it's like, well, can we just go with a bit of subtext, right? And because everyone, presumably at the time, is very well aware of the Jonestown massacre, like, I think we can look at what's happening within the film and draw our own conclusions anyway. So anyway, I'll try to stop complaining so much. There's a really, really hilarious moment after they get put into the room by the... like, they've been just held at gunpoint, and Mark's like, look, I don't like this. There's something fishy. And then Sheila's like, yeah, that guy seemed like a criminal. And it's like, yeah, guys, he just held you at gunpoint and genuinely looked like he wanted to kill you. Yeah, something is fishy. It's such bizarre dialogue, and I don't think it was meant to be funny, but boy, does it come across in a humorous way. At least from my perspective, it does. So anyway, they're there, and what happens then? Oh yeah, there's a python in a basket, and Sheila nearly gets bitten by it, and then Mark's all curiosity killed the cat, and that's sort of like just a bit of a budding relationship between the two of them, I think, within the context. They pretend that they're dead, and then they mug the old guy when he comes back in, and then they leave. So that's right. Yep. So they end up with a canoe and two guides, and they are sort of somewhere near the river, and they start to flirt, and she puts his hand on her breast at one point, and then they sort of, but like sarcastically, sort of, and then they start to sort of fight and just have a bit of banter, and then he walks off, and then Sheila's like, if you didn't carry such a chip on your shoulder, I would have given you a benefit or two. What is this? It's funny, right? Because Robert Kerman was a porn actor at the time, and there's some real, late 70s, early 80s porn vibes going on here. Not that that's something that I watch, but it's how I imagine must be. And it's just rather hilarious, the whole thing. So the next day they're going up the river, and then Sheila provides us with the generic stuff that she needs, that we need. The total lack of human presence, it's making her uncomfortable, which is funny because it sets up the crocodile coming and then eating one of the guides. So I don't know, maybe it's some sneaky dialogue for us. That's right. So the crocodile eats one of the guides, and it's brutal, albeit in the very ordinarily shot way that it is. And then that happens, and then again, I don't know if there were lengthier parts of this film that were or some of the scenes were chopped up a little bit, but it does definitely give the impression that that there were times where they did cut some bits, but it so quickly rushes to the next bit, and then Mark's all Sheila's upset as she would be, and then Mark's all, look, you just have to put it out of your mind. Just put it out of your mind. The fact that she's just witnessed this guy get eaten by... And he seems to be getting sort of frustrated by the fact that she's upset. It's like, okay, all right. So within all the context of everything happening, it's just like you just wish that the humans could act like in a little bit more of a human way. Like, it's not asking for that much, but it would be nice every now and again. So, there's that eerie moment where she's like, listen to the birds, they've all stopped chirping. And then, Mark realises they need to get out of there. But it's funny because it's never clear where they're running in these situations, right? They're just running to wherever the people might be. So they run, and then they find the other guide is dead. Very dead, like he's been eaten and stuff. Killed very much so anyway. And Mark says he's seen some bad things in his life, but that was the worst, which is sort of funny because when he's looking at it, he's sort of half cringing, but doesn't seem really that perturbed by it. And this guy was in Vietnam, as I said. It's like we've gone back to the Stone Age. And then Sheila's all, when the cannibals attack, I want you to kill me. So then they have sex. Now, there's one thing I think that this very quick moving situation does provide us with. That is credit to the movie, I think. And that is that by the end, by the time the helicopters finally come and they escape, our wonderful heroes escape, I am quite convinced that they would be like, okay, let's just kill ourselves, right? Because there's that scene where they're going to kill themselves, and that's when the helicopters show up. So the amount of nonsense that the movie puts these two through, I think I'll credit that. I'm going, yeah, these guys do look quite exhausted. I can buy that. So there you go. There's some credit. They get captured the next day after trying to escape and get taken finally back to Jonestown. Sorry, not Jonestown. To Jonas's town. Now, for a start, I feel like we're almost halfway through the movie at this point, which is one thing. But the other is that even within that context, I feel like the opportunity is missed to do so much more with Jonas, as I've mentioned. So he comes out and he's in some sort of reddish, pinkish, like Jesus-looking apparel, and he's there. He's very much the leader. He's very much the Jim Jones in this situation. And he explains to them that they like to live here away from pollution and corruption. And this, as I said, this is the one part of it that does have the potential to actually be a worthwhile social comment, right? Because whilst most of the other cannibal films sort of just put this this contrast between, the uncivilized and the civilized, and usually through very clumsy dialogue and, pretty ordinary depictions, to be honest, and it isn't very developed. In this film, that theme is intrinsically woven into the story, I think. It's just not, as I said, it's just not developed upon or focused on quite enough, in my opinion, to really do justice to itself. But I do actually very much like the idea of, we're away from pollution and corruption, right? But obviously, it is a very polluted, corrupted society that he's running, and it is quite a comment on cult leaders and whatnot. It's just that it's so generic the way that it's all done, and also the way Jonas is actually quite a bit of an idiot, as I'll get to. So there's some kind of ritual that they do the mating with the dead person's wife thing again, that they did in the original, in fact, I'll just make comment on that. It's almost, in some ways, it feels a bit like a sequel to Man from the Deep River, because it seems to be shot in the same place. I don't think it actually is, but it looks very similar. And it's like 8 years on, and Mimile's back from the dead. But Ivan Rasimov, who at the end of that movie sort of is shown to be taking over the place, right, the new leader, and then by this time it's like he's now a maniacal leader. I wonder if, like, in the original script, they were like, oh yeah, maybe we could make this like a sequel to that. Anyway. So... That's right. So during the ritual, the sister comes out, Diana, and she looks all brainwashed, right? And there's some just... After the ritual, Sheila goes in there with Jonas to have a chat to her, and she's talking in these awful cliches and stuff, and it's quite deliberate, right? Like it is like she's reading from verses of a Bible or something, or some kind of doctrine. So that's fine, but it just sounds absolutely awful. And so after, there's some kind of brouhaha going on outside the hut, so Jonas leaves, and then she quickly explains to her sister, to Sheila, now that she's got the opportunity, he's a fraud, a true sadist, whose only desire is power. And see, this is the part where, like, I'm like, fuck, can we... There's a genuine chance to do more, I think. Like, so much of the heavy lifting in this film is done purely by dialogue. And, like, all he seems to do, Jonas, is give people the cyanide, or whatever it is that he keeps getting them to drink, and just being convinced that people are on his side. Now, if I wanted to really stretch and give it credit that it probably doesn't deserve, I can only imagine that perhaps this is in some way how Jim Jones was, right? That he so strongly considered himself the Messiah, or a Messiah anyway, that, like, everyone must be convinced by me because I am so convincing. I am so righteous, right? But it's just that he's got that face, or he had that face, Ivan Rasimov, that, like, he just doesn't look like he'd suffer fools, right? Like, he doesn't look like he would be a fool. So, it's a little bit unconvincing in my opinion. So, he's also, I think, just not put to best use by the amount of time or the portion of the film that he spends, just telling people to do things and standing in front of them. Like, I think there needed to be a little bit more character development. So, he talks about some final voyage and through some kind of ceremony, and he's getting them all to drink something from the little cups. And it's probably worth noting, actually, obviously the drinking of the cyanide is, it's one of the most infamous, horrific things to happen in the history of the world, basically. And I think the film overdoes the drinking aspect of it. There's too many references to it, I think, right? Like, as I say, it is very on the nose, and the conclusion to these people is that they all drink poison and die, right? So, like, it's pretty clear, I think, what point that they're trying to make, so they don't need to overdo it, but nonetheless, the drinking, whatever it is that they're drinking, and I think they specified in the film, but I don't know enough about it, but it is there to... It seems to infest their minds, right? It's the reason why everyone seems to love Jonas so much. They're taking some kind of, infatuation serum, and it's working for him, right? So Mark tells them not to, and whacks it out of their hands, and then they tie him up. So this is the part where it's like, okay, this guy's showing hostility, and it's utterly ridiculous that Jonas would then get fooled by him later in the film, right? So he's come there, and presumably I think they explain, they've come there to try to rescue Diana, and obviously he doesn't want to lose Diana. And at what point has it changed? So, like, later, after Mark's tried to escape, he's told them not to drink from the cups. He comes back saying that he believes him now, and he's one of them. And for some reason, Jonas just believes him. And it's like, this guy, he's been drinking too much of the stuff as well, because he believes his own hype. And as I say, like, is it conceivable that this is a really effective social comment on, like, the stupidity of the cult leaders, right? Like, they are so confident in themselves. If I really wanted to draw that long a bow, I could. But the other side of that is it's very undermining to the idea, to the amount of charisma, and I know they're lunatics often, or almost always cult leaders, but to their career, just to their ability to control things. In order to be able to control that many people, you'd also have to have your wits about you, and it's quite bloody obvious that Mark isn't interested in the society. It's frankly absolutely ridiculous. So throughout this, Sheila's beginning to become more and more brainwashed, I suppose. There's all these scenes where she's just sort of sitting down, staring blankly, almost directly at the camera. And again, it's just the film. It's just doing too much heavy lifting with too small a content. It's like, okay, she's being brainwashed, but like, it just isn't justifying this, I don't think. Where are we? Yeah, that's right. So Mark, after he gets tied up, one of the locals, and there always seems to be a local in the group, right? That like that doesn't like what's going on. So he sets Mark free, and then Mark goes on a little run, but eventually gets chased, and then he kills one of the cannibals. But then that's when he comes back and submits his will to Jonas. There is a fairly lengthy little scene, I suppose, worth mentioning, where he's sort of stuck up the tree. Like he runs away and then he hides up a tree while the cannibals run around looking for him, and there's a snake that he's hiding from. It's quite funny. I said, oh, well, he's simultaneously trying not to get bitten by the snake, but also not be caught by the cannibals. But anyway, that's right. When he comes back, as he drinks, they're all singing, "My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." Now, is it just me, or are these scenes extraordinarily comical? Especially within the context of what the fuck movie that we're watching, right? So these ridiculous cannibal movies, and these people that are around, right? Why are they here? And look, I don't know. It's because it's so on the nose in reference, I think, to a lot of the stuff that happened in real life. I suppose. Look, I do hope I'm not coming across as disrespectful. I'm happily going to disrespect this movie itself, but nonetheless, that the whole thing's ridiculous. I'll make note actually at this point of that character with the beard. I think his name's Dick, and he sort of serves as the person to explain to us everything that's happening. Like while they're doing some rituals earlier in the movie, he's explaining to Mark, I believe, all the rituals and what they mean and stuff. And he's super loyal. So anyway, then Sheila's naked on the bed, painted in gold for some reason. Now, there's something so utterly hilarious about this, because there is no explanation for it. Like everything within the film is all like, topless and like no one's wearing much, and that's fine. But there's also something inherently dirty, right? We're in the woods in the forest, and they've got their little township that's got dirt everywhere, and like, what's the gold paint for? Like, why is that there? And there's just a little part of me that thinks maybe the filmmakers thought if we could get Janet Agron naked and paint her in gold, then maybe we could put that in a trailer somewhere and people would want to come and see our movie. Now, I'm just speculating, but, I have a feeling that they might have thought through that a little bit, because it doesn't lead to anywhere. I mean, I guess you could say it is a sort of powerful-ish image in terms of like she's brainwashed and stuff, because she's doing a sitting there with her eyes wide thing again, sort of staring blankly into the distance. But I'm not completely sure how the gold paint, like even in a symbolic sense, particularly represents her brainwashing. I don't know. There might be something really obscure that I'm missing or not aware of there, but I don't know. I think I doubt it somehow. And so there are just constantly obvious things that suggest that, the whole civilization is going to fall apart, and that Jonas doesn't have the control over everyone that he thinks, but he just seems to be oblivious to that fact. Like, I'm just thinking more and more about it. He's like a total idiot. So when I think he's going to, he's touching Sheila or something, and then Diana comes and starts defending her, and then he like beats up Diana and whips her and stuff, and it's like, that's for disobedience and whatnot. And then, so soon after we get an old guy who drinks some alcohol and he gets cast out. He gets a gun and some provisions and a copy of the good book, right? But he's drank alcohol so he can never be there again. And it's like, okay, you know, the old dude, he didn't seem to get as much leeway as, say, Diana did for like trying to defend her sister. But I don't know. Well, you know, maybe the depictions in this film are more nuanced and subtle than I'd actually really considered, right? Because this is what happens in like all cults, right? Like they say that they've got principles, and that it's all about whatever crap that they make up, and then the all-powerful leader just ends up having sex with all these women, right? Like this seems to be what happens in these places. So put it this way, I don't know if Sheila would have been cast out forever if she'd been caught drinking alcohol. So yeah, the Karen dude accuses there's some kind of ceremony, right? And the Karen guy accuses Mark of drinking, and this is I think this little exchange might be the best one in the movie. There you go. So he beats him up, as in Mark beats Karen up. No, the accusation comes, and then he brings the whiskey bottle and says, "See, look." And then Mark's all like, "No, how dare you? Whiskey is my poison, but I haven't touched a drop of it since I got here." And then they fight, and he beats him up. And then Jonas is all, he believes him. He says the case is closed, and he smiles at him. And it's interesting because why it's effective is, I think, because he's been sucked into this, I think, because he believes so strongly in his ridiculous authority that he thinks he does have the power to, within the space of a couple of days, turn this presumably alcoholic guy who had no interest or knowledge whatsoever of this sort of religion, if you like, to never drink again and submit his will completely to him. And there's something about the display of the way he does it, right, that seems to impress Jonas. And I think what I like about that is, I think it's the one time where Jonas's sort of idiocy is actually effectively depicted, I think, where it's like, no, what do they say in Jurassic Park? You never had control. That's the illusion, right? He's trying to have some kind of control here. You know, maybe that is the thing, right? That the Jonestown thing was never really going to work. But again, I want to be careful about overdoing that, because most of the stuff within this film is quite ridiculous. And then it really goes downhill, if it was already on a hill. And so what is it? There's Mark, Janet Agron. There's Mark, Sheila, Diana, and then Mimi Lay, who has a name, but she just seems to be Mimi Lay, just sort of bouncing around in these films. Those four sort of escape at some point, and there's this sort of hilarious moment where it's Dick, I think. Dick comes and informs Jonas that they've escaped, and he's like, "Oh, Karen was right." It's like, of course he was bloody right. Like, obviously these people aren't going to submit to your stupid cult religion thing. where it's not really clear what benefits they get out of it anyway. So during the process of the four of them escaping, very, very frustratingly at one point, they decide to... so Sheila is like tied up because she's under the influence of the follow Jonas serum, and they let her go because they think she's good now, and then she's not. She runs off screaming and stuff. It's like, oh, for Christ's sake. Now, it's really bizarre what happens over the next 5 minutes or so. And I think this is sort of cutting back and forth from this scene with the cannibals chasing them to back at the camp when the poison drinking is about to start. But it's not... Now, I'm as good as certain that Diana and Mimile die, but it's not at all clear to me why the hell they don't show it. Like, the screaming and sort of, oh, I know what happened. Like, but they don't make it clear at all what the hell is happening. And I don't know why. Like, the whole movie is meant to be revolving around Diane. Or, sorry, it's Diana, I think. And she comes to presumably this gruesome conclusion, and we don't even get to see it. But it's not even made particularly clear that is actually what's happening. And to me, that whole thing is just really bizarre. Well, I don't understand why they miss out on that, because there's so much gore. I don't know. I wonder if they just genuinely like ran out of time or something with this film, because as I say, like, it only goes 81 minutes, but I'd say there's probably at least 5 minutes in total of footage that's actually from other films. Like they have that scene from Man from the Deep River where a girl's sitting there with a boyfriend type, and then cannibals come and eat her. And that they show like the whole scene of that. That's a good couple of minutes. But there's a lot of different scenes that are a bit shorter that are pulled in like that. And it's a lot of the gory scenes. So it's like they didn't have the time or whatever to actually shoot their own. And it just sort of makes you think, okay, so you've got this fairly ambitious idea that isn't developed particularly well, and you know that the expectation is that it's going to be gore, so you just sort of bring in the gore from other movies. It's really disappointing, right? So we don't get to see that happen, and then there's Jonas telling them to all drink the cobra poison, and like, because of what this is clearly depicting, it is sort of powerful, I think. Going around with the little cups, making them drink it, and then seeing them drink it and dying, because I think we're all aware of that history, right? It's such an awful historic incident. I do wonder. I mean, far be it for the Italian cannibal film to be exploitative and a bit disrespectful. But I do wonder if ultimately they maybe should have just avoided this topic. Does it lend credence to the film that they were dealing with something so serious? Maybe it does. But I think it's possible that I think it's possible that they just went too far with it. Because even some of the details, right? There's a point where, like, a mother doesn't want her child to take it, and then he stabs the child, and I think aspects of that are actually have been recorded that is what happened. So I don't know. I just think it's a little bit too much. And as I say, you know, you see the scenes of all these people dying, and it's like, wow, this is actually quite, again, because of what it what it's alluding to very directly. It's very it's icky. It's difficult to deal with. And then you see like Dick stabs himself, and Jonas is genuinely devastated, right? Like he seems genuinely devastated. And I think it's all just a bit unearned, I think. And it could have been earned. As I say, I just think there needed to be more time spent on Jonas, because I actually think he was a really interesting character, right? Genuinely, I think he had at least potential to be a really interesting character. I think they needed to spend less time in New York at the start of the movie, and less time sort of developing Mark and Sheila's ridiculous relationship that we just don't care about, and more time developing Jonas. Sorry, I think I've said Jonah a number of times. It's Jonas, I do apologise. Then we get back to the nonsense. The helicopter comes, and there's quite an exciting scene. That's actually sort of before all the Jonah stuff. So they get back to New York, and then there's just some clean-up nonsense. They're talking about it on the news. They're talking about the leader of Jonas and stuff. I think this is all very reminiscent of the stories coming out about Jim Jones and Jonestown and all that. So fair enough. And then they sort of tell Sheila, like I don't know if they're cops or whoever they are, but they tell her to omit the information about the cannibals for political and economic reasons. But she refuses. She's determined. She's determined to say everything she knows. And then, hilarious at the end, the check bounces, because I didn't mention that, but she was paying Mark $80,000 to help her and come with her and stuff. And then it's hilarious. Well, what am I going to do now? Who's going to pay your expenses? And then he rips it up, and that's the end of the movie. And you're like, oh. I wish it had been a bit more focused. Yeah, there you go. I really do. Again, it's exploitation, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of the time there's genuine missed opportunities in these films, because sometimes I'm not sure they have the skill to develop the ideas that or the more powerful ideas that they're promulgating. But also beyond that, I think that they're not actually motivated to do them. Like, we know that the main reason for these films, or the main sort of aim with these films, is to bring, like, there's nudity and there's gore, right? That's the audience that they're targeting, or that's what they're targeting the audience with. And then, so that's one of the problems. Often the reason why I wonder who the real cannibals are type stuff, and to be clear, I mean that more in reference to non-cannibal Holocaust films, but that's the philosophy. I think the problem is partly the reason that always seems so lame is because, again, they're poorly written, but mainly because it's not really a motivation for the film. It's just like, literally, we need to have some story, so let's put that in, right? But yeah, it is. There are some aspects of this film that are more ambitious than the average cannibal film, but it's probably one of the worst ones that exists. So there you go. There are my thoughts on Eaten Alive! By Umberto Lenzi. So next week I'll be moving to Cannibal Ferox by Umberto Lenzi, which is a film that I love despite the fact that it's fucking terrible. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me here. I hope that I've got through reasonably well. As I said near the start, I do have COVID at the moment, and I think I'm on the improve now. So hopefully by next week I'll be absolutely improved and ready to kick into some more. And of course, join me for the Cannibal Ferox episode. That should be a lot of fun as well. And I think I'll announce the next 3 episodes that are coming after that on that episode as well. So as I say, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and do keep tuning in to the Italian Horror Guy podcast. Thanks very much, guys.